The chair now recognizes Mr. Crawford from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you and the ranking member for agreeing to hold this hearing, and thank you for allowing me to participate. Obviously, the purpose of my legislation is H.R. 3105, the Aquaculture Risk Reduction Act, is to remove the extreme threat of criminal penalties for engaging in the routine practices associated with fish farming. As the witnesses will attest, the threat of the Lacey Act penalties serve as a major deterrent for fish farmers either staying in or getting in the business of aquaculture. Penalties are so severe, in fact, for minor Lacey Act infractions that fish farmers can face a six-figure penalty or even time in federal prison. Such draconian penalties are especially unwarranted when significant safeguards already exist in terms of state and local laws and regulations and industry standards and controls. So I would urge the committee to support this effort, as it would relieve a tremendous burden off our nation's fish farmers, at the same time keeping the existing Lacey Act safeguards in place. We've had a couple of questions here addressing those comments that I just made and the assertions that I make in my opening comments. Mr. Woody, give me an example of an invasive species. We've had one, a non-native invasive species that's been talked about, the Asian carp.
Snakehead.
Snakehead. Okay, there's two. I'm going to talk about the Asian carp.
Okay.
I hear a lot of people complaining about the Asian carp and the origin of its introduction into the United States. Can you give me just a real quick briefing on how that came about?
Boy, I am not familiar with that.
No?
No.
Did Fish and Wildlife have any role to play in the introduction of that species?
I am not aware.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to find that out.
Okay.
Because we're here talking about a very important industry, certainly to my district, and the people who engage in the practice of aquaculture. And, you know, the statements made that these penalties, whether they be federal prison or six-figure fines, are just a figment of someone's imagination. I don't think they just conjured that up. Now, I've heard the three of you say that you don't know of any penalties of that nature that have ever been assessed, that anybody's ever been imprisoned for the accidental release of a non-native invasive species or the transfer of a protected species or what have you. But I've also asked other government officials on other issues and gotten their word in committee, and then a year later that word's no longer good. So my concern is that is it possible that legislation in the past may have been well-intentioned but overreaching and didn't take into consideration unintended consequences? Is that possible?
Now, with the Lacey Act, sir, it is, we have to prove, we look at intentionally and knowingly. I mean, somebody moving, for example, big head carp, if we're going to work on a project, I mean, it's going to be extensive, and we're going to show, or we're going to look at whether or not those people were intentionally and knowingly moving big head carp, say, from New Mexico to Colorado. So it's going to be intentionally and knowingly under the Lacey Act, not accidentally. I mean, we would look at intentionally and knowingly.
Is it possible that agents of the Fish and Wildlife could intentionally be moving a species and they, in fact, release a non-native invasive species into an area it's not supposed to be? Is that a possibility?
My agents? No, not that
It's
I'm
not
aware of.
possible? It's not possible that that could happen?
Not that I know of.
Not that you know of. But you're going to sit there and tell me that the Fish and Wildlife could never inadvertently release a non-native invasive species in an area where it shouldn't have been?
There could be a possibility, but I can't think of an example of one. I'm trying to think back, but I can't think of one.
Well, I don't think that my constituents have cooked up this notion that somehow they're going to face potential jail time and six-figure penalties. They want to be compliant. There are state laws on the books that incentivize them to be compliant and to exercise due diligence and caution. So I'm concerned at the resistance to H.R. 3105 when all we're doing is clarifying the intent and the spirit of the law to make sure that there isn't inadvertent inordinate attention paid to an accidental, just as the photo indicated, it was an accident. I don't think there was any intent to run a truck in the ditch. So, I mean, certainly that was accident, but there seems to be some great ambiguity in how that's interpreted. And, you know, I would hope that we could clarify that. My time is running low, so I can't ask my next question, but we're not trying to exploit a loophole or create a loophole. We're trying to provide a little bit of certainty to some people whose livelihood depend on it. So with that, I yield back.
Okay, the gentleman yields back.